Hi, everybody. Welcome to a very special episode of Am I the Asshole podcast. I'm joined by a very special guest today, a friend of mine. She's a three-time winner of Best Comedian in Albuquerque, the magazine's Best of the City. She's been featured on The Today Show, MTV, SiriusXM, Reductress, and The Advocate, currently in Albuquerque, but a New Yorker at heart. Sarah Kennedy, welcome to the program.
Oh, hi. I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. We were talking a little bit about a podcast you had in the past because, you know, this is the direction I want to go with this. But you had a podcast about Taylor Swift through the lens of queer theory. Is that right?
Yeah. So we had me and Hattie Hayes, a comedian and amazing performer and creative person in New York, hosted this show called Taydar, and we just went through all of Taylor Swift's records, her music videos, her real life, and just kind of looked at it like, is this queer culture? Is this gay? Is this gay? And the answer is overwhelmingly yes, which I think
Taylor
is pretty interesting.
She's not out.
No.
Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
So is a component of this that she is a lesbian, or is that just not even speculated on?
Well, I mean, the going theory right now is that she is a queer lady in some form or fashion, and that she's had relationships with other women, and she's sung about them pretty explicitly.
Interesting, but she won't sort of explicitly say it. So let me ask you about the term queer. I know I remember being a kid and being called that, and I'm sure I also said it. You know, I was young. But now I once did a show and I asked some NYU kids, what does it mean to be queer? And they said, whatever happens, happens.
Ooh.
Which I thought was really funny. But what exactly does it mean to be queer?
Well, I especially when we're talking about Taylor Swift, or a person who hasn't been open about their self-identity, like in a way that says, like, I identify as this. Sure. And you're looking at just the stuff that aligns with queer culture, which is just like an umbrella term that means like not straight. And so we're not going to go around it. I mean, there's a lot of people who are like gaylers and that kind of stuff because it works so well with Taylor. But we don't know if she identifies as gay or bi or as a lesbian or queer or whatever. So queer at least incorporates as much as possible. And we were pretty early on. We're like, let's at least, if we're gonna explore this, let's be as open and respectful as possible.
Is there a question as to why she hasn't actually come out?
Yeah. And that's something that we talk about a lot too. I mean, all the episodes are still available. People can go listen to it. But like, she came up through country music in a time that was still post 9/11 country music, which was extremely like, I mean, boots and like, it's always been about boots. But like, you know, it's like 6-pack and my truck and my car and like, it's like very aggro. And for her to kind of come up with these sweet little I'm a teenager songs, she had to be like heavily regulated anyway, just in public. And so I think that there's still some of that residual stuff that she's working through. And it's gotten even more complicated now with all of her like record label stuff. But
yeah, I have followed some of the drama, but I will tell you something, and you can shame me on this. I am a big Taylor Swift fan.
She's great.
But I'm kind of more into the bops. I'm not really into the fairy tale or whatever, folklore or whatever.
Oh, interesting.
Is that like, she used to be like, she drops bangers, you know, like what is it, 23 or like
22?
Yeah, 22.
You're aging her, man.
Well, Michael Jordan. There's a whole thing.
Well, that's true. That's very true. Whoa. Yeah.
What's the other one? I'm never ever getting back together with you or whatever. I'm not a very musical person. That's becoming obvious. But are we gonna get? Can I ask you? Are we gonna get more of that, Taylor? Because I'm really into that, and I was in love with her for a time.
Well, yeah. I mean, the nice thing is now that she's re-recording all of her albums so that she can have the rights to them back, then we do get all of the old bangers, but now kind of through a different lens. Or not even a lens, but just like with an aged perspective, which I think is nice. Excuse me. But
I love the collab with Panic at the Disco guy.
Sure.
I forget, what is it? Is that High Hopes?
That's me.
No.
Well, yeah, his is High Hopes.
That's me. Mm-hmm. That's me. And there's a clip I saw of her. She's like on her phone, you know, and he's like trying to nail the cut. and are in the studio and he like botches it, and then she's like, no, do it more like this, and then she like sings it differently, and he hits it. And there's so much respect coming off the Panic at the Disco guy, and like just seeing her work that way, like I've always thought of her as like kind of a self-made artist, which I think is mostly true. Yeah. Okay. Well, because her dad was like a record guy, right? But she wrote a lot of her own music.
She did. I mean, yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's like her origin story needs to and has been retconned enough that it's like, yeah, she does it. She's a songwriter. It's fine. But
what's retconned?
I mean, well, it's like a Marvel term or like a comic book term where they go back and they kind of rewrite history to like adjust for the current day story.
Oh, like a retroactive little rewrite situation?
Yeah.
Interesting. Wow, you know a lot of culture that I don't know. But yeah, I love that clip because I don't know. I think individualism, and I'm not like a libertarian or a conservative or anything, but individualism is a value of mine when it comes to art. Like I really like the kind of all-in person who does it all, and I guess I saw in that clip a lot of mutual respect, and I've always kind of viewed Taylor that way, even if that's not maybe entirely accurate. And it gave me chills, and that's I think that's a special thing when something can give you a chill.
Yeah, she's pretty cool. Also, he was sick that day. So the day that they recorded that song, he was so sick, and then he would come in, and she'd be like, higher notes, and he'd be like, oh, okay.
Wow. Yeah, I guess there's also something cool to me about like, I don't know. It was also like, it's also kind of a hierarchy reversal. You see so much men telling women what to do, and it's just like she's like not even looking at him. She's just looking at her phone. It's kind of like, you just do it this way. It was badass. I mean,
she seems badass. Yeah, she seems like she knows enough about music and the music industry now as an adult that she's able to collaborate in a very professional and like, we're making amazing things kind of way. Or, you know what I mean? Like they can really bust stuff out pretty quickly. Her and Jack Antonoff and like the guy from The National. I mean, they made 2 albums this year. That's wild.
Wow.
So
let's get away from Taylor, even though I love her. So you are a lesbian. Let's talk about some slights, some, people. I'm still learning how to approach these things. I try to err on the side of caution, but yeah, what are some like microaggressions or just some little things people can avoid when they encounter, LGBTQ plus folks?
Well, it's so interesting too, because I think, well, now this seems so outdated, knowing the way that like gender stuff has kind of progressed and evolved. But like when I first started using Twitter, I used to tweet every time somebody called me sir. I just thought that was notable. Like the same way that people would tweet like, oh, I just got pulled over by the cops, or I'm getting pulled over by the cops. I would be like, just got called sir. Which I know one has much higher stakes than the other. But
wait, I need this explained. Why are people are calling you sir?
They would. Yeah, back in the day when I was, I don't know, more petite, I suppose. So they were, like they just don't see. Like I had short hair, and I was wearing like tomboy clothes, and then they'd just be like, "I'm so sorry, sir," and then I'd be like, "No problem," and they'd be like,
"Wait, so they were genuinely." Mistaking you for a guy, or
in a moment, just like in periphery, yes. And then, or they were being shitty. I can't tell. I mean, I can't tell.
Got it. Yeah, because you have short hair. I mean, I think you would have to be a fucking moron to think that you're a male. I mean, you would have to really be some kind of blind. I mean, so you would then go on Twitter to make fun of.
Just a tally, just kind of tally how often it happened, because it happened enough that I was like, this is notable. So like, it's the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing as all microaggressions. They all just add up, and then at some point you're like, no more. So
I guess the takeaway, because I'm not on board for these idiots. I don't understand how anyone could think you were a guy because you look like a woman. Like that's ridiculous. But I guess the takeaway there is, just don't gender shit. Don't be throwing out sirs or ma'ams unless you're kind of 100% sure.
Yeah. I mean, at the time, I was wearing a lot of like Groucho Marx glasses and hiding behind bushes and stuff. I mean, it's not entirely on them.
Okay.
But
so now go ahead.
No, that's it. I was just helping you transition.
you were in New York, so now you're in
Mhm.
Albuquerque, which is like the biggest city in New Mexico.
Yeah.
So it's probably a little bit hip, but how do you feel, attitudes toward LGBTQ plus are there?
It's interesting. I feel like it was gayer before I left, and then I came back, and maybe it's just because I got so spoiled in New York about being able to go to gay bars in every borough if I wanted to.
Yeah.
But I came back here, and we only have. I mean, COVID obviously impacted this too, but like, there's one open gay bar, and the only reason they're open is because they pivoted to being a restaurant, and then all
Wow.
the other ones are
That's
still
tough.
closed. But
Now, I've been to a gay bar,
ooh,
and is it because this is another question I have because I feel like, generally speaking, I used to have a joke, right? Because it's LGBT and now it's LGBTQ plus, or there's other letters and stuff. But the joke being that I've always felt that gay men are sort of what, like, people even say gay, right? They'll say like you're gay,
yeah.
but it's like, well, I'm not gay, I'm a lesbian. But it's like, what is there an aspect where gay men kind of dominate the conversation? Is that there?
I mean, there's part of that because, no matter what, there's still just all these other systemic stuff that like lends itself
Mhm.
to any interaction that you have with another person. So that's a big part. And actually, I think at last count, and this is before COVID, there was only 16 lesbian bars that were open across the country left in the country.
No
And there's
way.
at least a gay bar in every town. And most of the time it does count everybody under the umbrella at the gay bar, or you hope it does.
Yeah.
But there has just been this like extinction of these lady centric kind of spaces that and there's a bunch of reasons for that, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
I still think it's sad no matter what the reasons are.
I mean, I had the perception that there are fewer lesbians than gay men, and I don't know if that's real. What
Mm.
do you think there?
Well, it's really interesting because I think the term itself is kind of going through kind of an up and down with people who want to self-identify somewhere in the queer
Mhm.
spectrum. So I think that there's a lot of queer women. I think that there's a lot of bisexual women. I think that there's a lot of women who show up and are open about the way that they feel to people that maybe
Mhm.
men still quite don't feel as comfortable doing. And so, but then at the same time, like if you just look at like the numbers of like men who feel comfortable being like, I'm gay, which I don't think they scream like that, but then
Right. I hadn't
just
heard it that way, but that would be
right.
kind of cool.
Yeah, it's powerful, but they tend to show up a little bit more than ladies do in that way.
Interesting. Well, we got a good situation. I think this is going to take us to some interesting places, and
Cool.
and thank you again for coming on and teaching me these things. AITA for saying my lesbianism was a phase.
Ooh.
So I, 19F, started to explore my sexuality pretty late to people's standards and only started dating when I moved out for university at 18. I ended up getting pretty close with a girl who we'll call Jane, and we started dating. I told Jane that I was exploring myself, so it might not work out. And she was totally cool with that. We dated for 5 months, and I took on the label of lesbian. Turns out I'm straight.
Oh,
Jane and I broke up. We're still super close, and that was that. I didn't explain it all to my family, but they knew I was experimenting. Well, my sister, 17F, came out yesterday as lesbian. And my mom brought up that I am lesbian. I corrected her and said, actually, I was just experimenting. It was more of a phase. I'm straight. I didn't think anything of it, and we continued on with our day. It wasn't until earlier today that my mom called me down and had a go at me for saying my lesbianism was a phase and that my sister got really upset that I was mocking her sexuality.
oh
My
no.
mom then insisted I write an apology letter to sister and started sending me articles on how to be a better ally. I've tried apologizing to my sister, but she's really milking this, in my opinion. AITA.
Ooh,
Juicy, right?
this is a good one. This is a really, really good one. Also, this is another one of those examples because I being part of the Facebook group and listening to this and being active in seeing these come down the chute. I always see these ones where I'm like, I think I know the answer right away. And then by the end of it, I'm like, wait a second now. Like, by the end of it, there's always something that I'm like, this is now everybody sucks here. And I think that there's a little bit of that in this scenario in particular, because I think obviously she does need to be a good ally to her sister. Obviously, she could have said something a little bit different, like, I know what it's like to date a girl and kind of try to figure that out. And even though my situation at the end turned out a little differently, maybe yours won't. And this is something for you to explore, and it's great.
Right.
But being forced to write an apology and that kind of stuff is just a little, anything that gets mandated, I think, is always a little bit too far. But
yeah, definitely. I mean, I think first I want to just start us off on phase,
Sure.
This is, first of all, a big cultural thing. There's a sketch which I think is funny, but you can tell me if it's just offensive and ignorant. But the sketch is, I believe it's Whitest Kids You Know, and the daughter is in college and the son's in college, and the daughter comes out and says she's a lesbian, and the parents are just like, the dad's reading the newspaper and he doesn't even stop reading it. And then the son says, I'm gay, and the parents freak the fuck out.
Well, sure. Yeah.
I'm relieved to hear you laugh. Now I don't feel like a bigot.
Okay.
Why is this? I mean, my first thought is this is a shame thing,
Mm-hmm.
This is a shame thing, because as a guy, I would never feel, I mean, I have told people, and I'll tell you now, like, I watch gay porn, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm just not attracted to men.
Right.
It's a porn thing, that's it. However, I would say there is a lot of shame. Like, I'm careful with who I say this in front of, because I have had friends who like really kind of get stuck on it, and they're like, that means you're gay. And I'm like, no, bro, it doesn't. And why are you freaked out? Like, what do
Yeah.
you think's going to happen?
That's so interesting. I can't believe somebody would get so, but again, anytime that this kind of stuff happens, and I think that that's actually what's happening in this scenario also, is people's reaction to any self-identity, like any sort of like declarative statement about who you are as a person, says so much more about them than it does about you. So even if, like you just said, like, I make some choices like this, but I identify this way, sometimes people are like, what? And then like, but that's all them. And I think that that's what's happening right now. This sister was maybe hoping for, I don't really know what the sister was hoping for, other than like, this is also one of those weird things, because like, obviously it's so hurtful for people to say it's a phase when in particular to a woman's sexuality, because it's already erased. It already doesn't like get a lot of like weight given to it. But in this situation, I think that there was some adequate amount of like consideration and some real time spent being like, is this me? Where do I lie on this thing? Like, I think that that's more done than a lot of people were willing to do. So
you're saying basically that her dropping it was a phase. It was a little bit reductive, but it was obviously in a context of, that she was celebrating it.
No, I mean, I think the wording sucks. I think the punishment doesn't fit the crime. And I also think, I don't know, I just think it's also really hard when you're first coming out too, because you don't have immediate access to a community. You just are part of one. And so like, she may have known that. I mean, she obviously, if her sister had come out when she first had the girlfriend, and then all of a sudden they broke up and now that's not an accessible ally to her, she might feel really alienated and really need somebody.
Right. And then she's kind of just, I don't like there's a dismissiveness in what the sister is doing. But before we go to the mechanics of this, I'm wondering, do you see eye to eye with me on the reason, why is the concept of a lesbian phase, why is that a thing? And what I was trying to theorize is that it's because a guy can't really test the waters because there's so much more shame associated with that. Whereas the lesbian phase, I mean, you look at how guys perceive lesbians and they're just like, oh, it's hot, boo, and no one even gives a shit, really. Are you on board for why the concept of the lesbian phase is kind of allowable and less stigmatized?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going back to what I said earlier too, like that idea that women's sexuality gets erased or ignored kind of allows for, I don't know, like stuff can happen in different corners then at that point. And if you're in college and you're getting exposed to like thoughts you've never had before and like big thinking and like big concepts and people you've never thought you'd experience in your life, it would make sense that women would be able to be like, maybe this also extends to my physicality, my intimacy. And so what I think is really sad is that it doesn't happen the same way for boys, because boys should be allowed to do that and still have that kind of space, and whatever shakes out at the end of it. I still don't know if it's a phase, but I do know that it's definitely like something people need to go through to, figure out who they are and what happens going forward. Because also, the more you can have experiences like that,
right,
hopefully the more empathetic you are to people. But although I will say, my hope that you would be more empathetic did not translate into this particular scenario, because she did not show up for her sister.
It didn't. The way she kind of broached it. So why is the term phase offensive? I guess that's also not quite clicking. I see the dismissiveness in what she's doing, right? Because it was just a phase. Like, I understand that, but like, you don't seem to like the idea of a phase either. What's wrong with a phase?
I don't know. I don't like the idea. And maybe this is just like, I don't like the idea of like connecting with a person in any fashion, even if the physical part didn't work out or whatever, and then having it be dismissed or minimized. So it's like, and there were times in college where it's like, I connected with girls and we even tried to date, but it was pretty clear that they weren't this wasn't who they were. But I still consider those to be impactful, real relationships that I had with those people. That doesn't get swept under the rug just because, they would actually prefer to be with men, or they are now currently married with men, or like whatever.
Right.
There was still, to call it a phase takes the partner out of it, and I think takes the respect out of what you've the intimacy that you can have with a person, even if it doesn't work out.
I love that. I feel you there. That's starting to click with me. Yeah, I mean, I think the way Sister came about this was Mom brings up that she was a lesbian. So, and then this OP corrects her. Actually, I was just experimenting. It was more of a phase. I'm straight. Is that true? I mean, is it true, or do you see shame in that statement?
Well, the thing, as soon as you started reading this, the thing that really stuck out to me is that the OP is 19. Like, she's only 2 years older than her sister.
Right.
There just seems like there's so much more life that could happen to both of these girls that I don't see like really being so finite. And that's another reason why I'm sure that the phase thing hit a little hard, because it's like, what, you're only 2 years older than me. Like, what could you possibly know about who you're going to end up with, what's going to happen, any of that? And why would you minimize my thing then in that way? Because she's already defensive. But
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm on board for it being maybe a little too certain. But I guess like when I look at my own sexuality and I go, well, how do I know I'm not gay? And honestly, it really is smell. As weird as that is, like I smell a guy and I'm like I don't want to say repelled is the right word, but not attracted to in a way that is like that. Whereas I smell a woman and it's like intoxicating, not all the time, but when I'm attracted to her, it's like it honestly, like it is a feeling like in my chest almost, and it's like overwhelming. I think that's like pheromones or some shit. So I'm kind of on board with her having the knowledge, but I guess what I'm confused about is like, well, if you're willing to experiment and you were willing to try it, and I love what you said, like this was a relationship, there was intimacy there. I mean, this was 5 fucking months, And
when you're 19, when you're like 17 to 19, 5 months is a long relationship. Like that's a big one.
Absolutely. 5 months is a long time, so I guess, is there something, I mean, to me, when she just goes like, I'm straight, I'm like, well, are you straight? Like it seems like you're on the straight side of the spectrum. But, people have told me, like, they go, oh, well, you watch gay porn, that means you're queer. And I'm like, well, I would feel uncomfortable kind of co-opting that.
Sure.
Because, it's just not enough of my identity. But if I was with someone who was queer and they would feel more comfortable by it, I would gladly admit that to them, to be like, yeah, we have this in common. Whereas what Sister is doing is being like, no, we don't have this in common. It was just a phase and I was just experimenting. And that is what I see the dismissiveness where that kind of lives.
Yeah. Definitely. And, with sisters in particular, like, especially older sister, younger sister relationships, like, there's gotta be some other stuff that's like some resentment of their teens that have built up and this kind of stuff where it's like, you never
Sure.
support me. You're never here for me. Like some of that kind of stuff too, that's maybe not even being brought to the table here. Cause
Right. I mean, she could have just as easily said, like, "Yeah, I've been there." Honestly, she has.
Yeah.
She has, and so the fact that she's getting all kind of rigid about it to me does, and I hate to drop this phrase, but I think it's a little bit apt, internalize homophobia.
It is. No, it really, really is. And I think, even if the sister the older sister never, ever, 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 ever dated another woman ever again. It's the same thing as like, oh, I took a semester of French in college. Do you know what I mean? Like you could still be like, yeah. I guess that was my French phase, but another person is involved. Like your French teacher isn't going to get mad that you called your French phase a phase, but the person that you were dating and like kissed and like whatever, and then also went to bat for with your own family. Right. Probably is going to have, some hurt feelings, or you should maybe consider them in some stuff. But
yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board for that. I'm understanding now why phase could be seen as very reductive and mean, and because it was a real relationship. It wasn't just the moon turning a certain direction. You had a real meaningful series of interactions with this person. Oil, see you later, writes, phase is a heavy word when talking about coming out and sexually, and is regularly used to dismiss people's identity. So is that kind of just a reference to, people saying like, oh, I'm a lesbian, I'm gay. Oh, you're just going through a phase.
Right. That sucks too. Mm-hmm. It can take a lot of bravery to finally say like, me is this. And so, when I talk about Taylor Swift, that's kind of the same thing. It can take a lot of bravery for her to get here, even though there's other queer artists right now. So the last thing you want is for somebody to be like, no, you just started hanging out with Victoria's Secret models. Like, that would be the worst thing that could happen to her. Also, I will
Taylor, go ahead.
I think you had a...
Well, with Taylor, I was going to say, there's also a business concern, she's a businesswoman. And I think the other aspect of identity that I've been chewing a lot on too is like, look, do I think it would be great for queer people if Taylor came out? I do. I think that would be powerful to have someone, so huge and so mainstream who's dropping straight bangers to come out, but it's still her choice and that's her right.
Yeah.
And if that is a business concern for her, it is a little bit like shrewd and a little bit by the numbers, but that's her right. And like, I can't fault her for that.
And also like, can you imagine, Danny, having a stadium of people scream words that you wrote back at you? And then be like, well, if I tell people something about myself, I'm going to be down to like a teeny tiny little spot. Maybe Radio City Music Hall. Maybe. A stadium.
Oh, you think it would go down?
Don't you think?
The numbers would go down?
Don't you? I can't imagine.
I guess... I feel like a lot of Taylor's fan base is young women. Mm-hmm. So maybe honestly, you're going to be more in tune with this than me. My perception is, would her audience go down? Of course it would go down. 10%, 20%, sure, but not 50%, I don't think.
So like from like MetLife Stadium to like Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know my stadium numbers. Again, there's a lot of culture that that I don't, but yes, something like that.
That's fair.
Hyacinth F. Go.
Well, the one thing I was going to say before was that, like, on the reverse side of things, there is just as much toxicity about. So there's this concept, and it's really, really outdated, and it's one of the things that gets argued about the most when people identify as lesbians. And it's the idea that you can be a gold star lesbian, and a gold star lesbian is an old style joke that means that you've never been with a dude. And so like it used to be a thing. I remember when I first came out, like I remember saying like, yeah, I'm gold star lesbian because I'm 18, and like, but like it's like always been the thing. And then all of a sudden people were like, this makes me feel so shitty because to now all of a sudden have been with men, all of a sudden I'm less gay or I'm less queer or like whatever. And you don't know the history that I had that brought me to this. And so that almost feels like a weird, like, like if you took an ink blot of what was happening in the scenario and what's happening in culture and you kind of opened it up, the Gold Star lesbian thing is like almost the hyper opposite of the idea of calling being gay a phase, where it's like,
yeah.
So
it's toxic. It's very rigid as well, and it's kind of because think about the Gold Star lesbian is actually kind of the mirror of the man who wants to experiment with men, who is curious about it, but can't because he knows that if you even dabble, it's a mark of shame, a turnoff to women. I've already had the thought. I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to keep in this thing. I don't know if I'm going to keep in this thing about gay porn. I'm afraid that I could lose ladies.
No, and actually, I think you're actually building a quadrant right now, right? So you've got this kind of like idea of like even this kind of stuff, because if you are, however, like anywhere on the gender spectrum and identify as straight, and you have had any sort of like, oh, I'm losing the thread of what I wanted to say, but like there is gay and straight and have done stuff and won't do stuff, as are the like Y and X axes that I'm coming up with right now.
Sure.
And like each of them, depending on where you are on the gender spectrum, each come with their own version of like backlash or whatever. And I've heard that before, where it's like, I mean, your experience right now is maybe not like as far out as some of the bisexual gentlemen that I know, but like there has been a lot of times where people have been like, bisexual dudes, oh no. But then I think that there's also now, like on Broad City, I think Alana meets a bisexual dude and she's like so thrilled about it. And so it's coming around.
Yeah. I mean, I think in certain circles it's accepted, but I think it's an okay Cupid question as well, and some people will say it's important. I mean, it's certainly on the other side. I mean, I really just don't think the stigma is nearly as common with men. Of like I think all my exes had some sort of lesbian encounter, and I was like, yeah, well, I don't care.
A real Scott Pilgrim situation. Have you seen Scott?
I haven't.
Okay.
Again, you just gotta talk about Highlights magazine. That's kind of where I ended my
a real goofus, but not a real gallant. You know what I mean?
I don't know what we're talking about.
Goofus and gallant. You said Highlights. You said you were a Highlights fan.
And Goofus? It was a joke. I only even know the name of the magazine. I don't even know what's in there. What's Goofus and gallant? It sounds
Goofus and gallant are like a classic part of Highlights magazine, where it's like Goofus, and then he does something that's like messed up. And then it's like, but gallant, and then like gallant does the right thing in the situation. And so it's supposed to teach you like, don't do this, do this, but it's with these two characters.
Okay, well, listen, let's just not talk about culture.
Right,
Hyacinth FT. The OP doesn't sound like she had a lesbian phase anyway. The way she describes it, she was straight the entire time and experimenting. It's not like she turned lesbian and then turned straight again. How do you feel about that? Because I kind of feel like that's going back to this kind of rigid model of the Gold Star lesbian thing. I'm like, well, isn't it just more accurate to say sexuality is a spectrum and she's not all the way straight on the spectrum? Like that to me seems like a more reasonable approach to conceptualizing these things.
It's just very difficult. I mean, at this point now we're talking about this concept of like ascribed identity versus like self-identity. And so like you can say whatever you want about yourself, but if people don't see it that way, that's almost 50% of the equation. And that's the fight that people have to go through to get accepted. And so for that person in that comment to say that, it's like, I mean, the idea of turning is also like really, really fraught as a concept.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean, see, I don't know. I don't know if you're going to hate this, but I've had this take for a while and I hope it's not toxic, but here it is. For a while, the rhetoric on the right was homosexuality is a choice. And so then a lot of people on the left said homosexuality is not a choice. And that's where we got into Born This Way, etc. And that's fine. But I also feel like it can be a choice. There are certain people who, kind of switch their sexuality. And it's not on me to say that they were born this way or that way, but they simply chose to move in a different direction. And I guess I've never really liked that it can't be a choice. I'm like, well, why can't it be a choice? Maybe you have like a series of bad interactions with men and you're like, I'm just fucking done with men. I just am.
Well, I think actions are a choice. I think always
Mhm.
actions are a choice. And
Right.
a lot of the conversion therapy rhetoric is about like, who you are is not a choice, but it is still a
Mm.
sin. So your actions are going to be what save you here. And so then the focus comes on this idea of just like full abstinence sometimes, or like some
Yeah.
wild wacky things. But even if you don't take it to like that extreme of a level, you there is still times where you can be like, oh, I feel this way. Or it's the same thing as being in a relationship. Like, you don't cheat on your spouse because you love your spouse. Those are
Right.
choices that you're choosing to make or not make. And that
Right.
doesn't impact, your proclivity toward a whole swath of people. But
Right. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I find I understand. I understand why the choice rhetoric is rejected, because it goes a very toxic route, because there are people who think it's a sin and other ridiculous things. But I guess I just feel people can be excluded by that as well, because
yeah,
there might be people who just want to be in lesbian relationships but actually don't really have they might have a proclivity toward men that they actively suppress, and it's like, so, that's their right. Like, if that's how they want to do it, and they're like, I don't want to be straight, I don't want to be in a relationship with a man, I'm attracted to men, but I feel safer in the company of women, and so that's what I'm doing, because it's just not that important. Dick isn't that important to me.
sure.
So I'm like, why is that person not to be accepted? I mean, I think they would be accepted. I guess
Well,
I
that
guess this is
identity
yeah.
that's a bisexual person. You know what I mean? Who ends up connecting with a person that they've found other stuff in common with, or other things that really.
What if it's not sexual?
Well, so go on.
Well, I mean, look, I'm talking about, really, I'll
Safety.
just be direct. I'm
Okay.
talking about a phenomenon where, and this is documented in psychological literature, where women are in physically abusive relationships with men,
Sure.
and then they become lesbians. And is that a choice? I would say it is. I wouldn't say that those women were born that way. I think they were in a series of horrible relationships, and just the very concept of a man and of men. And I've run into this on Twitter as well. Women who have had such bad relationships with men again and again, that they're scared of men, just generally men.
Like a
Bad,
real fried greens tomatoes situation. And again, probably a cultural touchstone that you don't
Again,
like.
a miss.
Mm-hmm.
Again, a miss
That's
for
fine.
me. It
That's
sounded
fine.
really good, though. I
Yeah.
feel like it was spot on. So I apologize for not getting it. But
Those
go
people
on.
are still bisexual, Danny.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I mean, like, even if you have been in a series of abusive situations,
Sure.
that doesn't change your identity. Like, your identity is such a core part of you. And if you found solace in dating women, it's because that's another part of your identity. I mean, for as much as you say that there's like psychological stuff that points to this, I know for
Yeah.
a fact that there is stuff that points to the idea of women who have been in abusive situations who are stuck in a cycle of abuse with only men, and also end up with a man who is wonderful, or maybe don't, or whatever. There's just it can go a whole sprinkler system, different kinds of ways.
Right. Right. So basically, you're saying, well, if it plays as a choice, is it something that's reads as a choice? Like, that's simply explained as being bisexual.
Yeah, I mean, or queer in whatever way too, because you can also have like a situation where you are how you want. I mean, that's the nice thing about identity, is like, as much as it's like we can point at people and be like, two women together, that's lesbians. But they have a little bit. I guess maybe the choice comes in about like how the nomenclature, and like how they want to identify,
Right.
and that's where the picking comes in.
As I go on about it, I'm realizing it's really not that meaty of a distinction. I guess I just always saw it as a reaction, and I guess I feel that some people do choose, but I don't think those people are made to feel excluded because they just fall under a different umbrella. Like you said, they're just bisexual. It's not really complicated. It's not like there's no room for them because they quote unquote chose, even if they view it that way.
Yeah,
like, okay,
and
you chose.
There's domestic, like intimate partner violence between women and women too. And so, it doesn't just stop because you decided to go with a different gender identity.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no, and I wasn't saying. I mean, look, men are far more, I think, violent. Well, I've run into different things on that, but anyway, we don't need to go into it. I
Do
feel
you hear about
satisfied.
the opposite happening a lot too, where it's like, because I know of intimate partner violence that's happening between two dudes too, or there's abuse.
Well, yeah, well, no, I mean that is more close to what I'm saying, right? I'm saying women who have been in relationships with men who are physically abusive. So I would say it wouldn't surprise me to hear. I don't know anything about this. That's also happening in male relationships. I would be surprised to learn that it's prevalent at any near of a level in relationships with two women.
Intimate partner violence is like nothing to make fun of. However, as soon as I said like the idea of two dudes doing it, I had this idea of like the Notre Dame logo fighting against the Notre Dame logo, like right outside on their lawn, being like, "Hey, put them up, get a good."
Sugar Glove Fairy Rise, NTA, this is a weird chain of events. Your mom outs you. I'm assuming you hadn't told your little sister about it. You correct her, and then she tries to make out that you've mocked your little sister and then tried to make you write an apology letter like you were 5. I get that coming out can be emotional, but really? I'm not reading. See, I think OP would have said that. I have enough faith in OP that little sister knew already. I think that would have been a salient part of the story had that been a reveal. I don't think it was.
I agree.
I think the letter is a misstep, and I almost feel like mom is projecting something onto this because it just seems like a very odd way to resolve this. It's also doesn't necessarily feel like the sister is all that mad. I mean, maybe I'm just trusting OP too much, but like she describes the sister as really milking it, and then she doesn't mention at all how like hurt sister was. It's all mom insisting that sister got really upset.
Yeah. I also wonder if that mom is like, what? You know what I mean? Like it's definitely like a process that parents have to go through when they kind of raise you and they think that you've got like a trajectory, and then they've got to change their minds about what that looks like. And so if you only did that with your older daughter and you'd be like, no problem, happy to support, here to be good to you. And then your younger daughter comes out too, and you're just like, okay, wow, okay, I was not expecting this for either daughter. Right. Definitely not both daughters. Okay, no problem. We're just gonna move on. And then the other one pushes back so hard at 19. I'm sure as a mom, you're like, I am just trying to like weather the storm. Yeah.
At her wit's end a little bit, maybe she's emotional, she's oversensitive, and then I was trying to say like, so she's then projecting the emotionality onto the sister, and the sister's like, yeah, I'm like pissed off, and it doesn't warrant a letter. Sailor Mercurial writes, no assholes here. Labels change all the time. You should not be penalized for recognizing that you identified as a lesbian at the time, but no longer do. At the same time, plenty of people have been told that their sexuality is a phase by people meaning that there is something inherently wrong with their sexuality. The connotations of calling it a phase are widely negative, so your mom and sister's reactions are not unexpected or inappropriate.
That's Sailor Mercurial is the name of that person?
Yes.
So Sailor Mercury is, I'm going to fill you in on this, one of the queer characters from Sailor Moon. So, that's a person like coming from like a queer side of things and like really looking at
Sailor
things
Moon
with like
queer.
That character is, although it got like retconned or like edited in the American version that they're like cousins or sisters or something, but in the original version,
the Japanese version, interesting. Well, I think we're probably in agreement, but I'm actually not sure because we've gone a lot of places with this. AITA for saying my lesbianism was a phase. I'm a little bit, I think I'm ready to say ITA. Because it was dismissive and it was harsh. It didn't come as a place of empathy. I think we both agreed that it's at least had the tone of something with some internalized homophobia. It felt like it came out of a defensive place. I don't necessarily think mom is offering a good solution here. I don't think a letter is necessary. I think this is a simple sit-down conversation and offer the support that you should have led with and just say like, hey, I've been there. I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. And I accept you and I'm excited for you. But I do think it was an asshole comment. I'm on YTA. Where are you?
Is there an everyone sucks here but the little sister? Is that is there a way to
Yeah, you can.
shorten
So
that
you can
down?
say you're saying everyone sucks here.
I think the
That
mom
it's
hasn't been the best in this situation, and I don't think the older sister is showing up with empathy, despite having gone through maybe the closest thing to a similar situation that the younger sister is currently going through.
so you're saying everyone sucks here, mom and OP.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason I'm not fully there is because I'm gonna give it to mom that she's picking up on something.
Mm.
I guess she is kind of reaching, saying that I was mocking her sexuality. That doesn't seem like an accurate classification
Yeah.
exactly.
There's so
It wasn't
much.
mocking.
No, it's
It
not
wasn't.
mocking.
I think I could meet you. I think I could meet you. That's definitely a reach. It wasn't mocking. I would say it was like she was actually reducing her own sexuality, but she wasn't really mocking the sister. That would be more like if she had said, what you're doing is just a phase. And she
Right.
actually didn't say anything like that. I
Yeah,
think I can come with you.
if she had said like what you're doing is a phase because what I went through was a phase and I will not write you a note, that would be like, okay, that's pretty clearly harsh. But I don't think the mom is doing the real conflict resolution steps that she needs to be doing here. And I think the younger sister needs to find like some real community, like real.
So I think then you brought me on board. AITA for saying my lesbianism was a phase. We agree. Everyone sucks here, meaning OP and the mom are assholes. Sarah, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been a joy. I think I thought I was going to learn about lesbianism, and instead I learned everything about culture. I didn't. The amount of knowledge I don't have is Goofus and Gallant. Everything about Taylor, retcon, Mercurial, Sailor Mercurial. I mean, it's insane how much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you want to learn more about lesbians, watch Fried Green Tomatoes. I think it's streaming on Amazon Prime because that's another. Then you get like a twofer. You get one reference that I made that you didn't get, and you'd get some more lessons about the woman-oriented experience.
Love it. Well, thank you so much. You've been a real joy. Thank you for bringing your insights. You guys can follow Sarah on Twitter. I mean, plug away, Sarah.
Sure. So I am on Twitter and Instagram as Sarah Comedy, but the comedy is with a K. That's the most simple way I can describe it. It's the worst handle, but that's what it is. But I am so grateful to get to be on this. I really have followed this since the very, very beginning. And Danny, I think you're doing a great job here, and this is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm trying my best. So, all right, guys. Well, that's it. We'll see you next time.